我想我先一开始就先起了个头，那主要是张一鸣先生跟 Wolf 先生这边的调性事实上是非常迥异的。那这个论坛比较有意思的地方就是在这里，是说，我们回想当时04年想办法把行动设备跟艺术要串起来，那在今日面对的问题还是非常近似的。艺术怎么样介入到一个行动的终端设备，它有什么样的火花的可能性？OK， 好，那所以接下来我们请那个 Wolf Lisa 也许介绍一下他长期在经营数位艺术这一块以及有可能应用的想象。好，那我们现在请 Wolf Lisa， 麻烦把画面切回去。
Oh, right. Sorry, I have to use the phone. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here, and I'm coming back to Taipei now for the second time, being here last year with a gallery presentation downstairs, and really experienced it as a very friendly and very interested country. So after Escher spoke so much about, from my point of view, contemporary work, I would like to take you for a little moment back to the beginnings of digital art, because this has a lot to do with my background, where I'm coming from, how I'm looking at art, and why I represent digital art, and how I made it my major purpose in life to represent this field. I was always working in the art field, and when I really got into it and looked at a career in this field, I realized, or I looked at the different movements in art at the time. That was in the 80s mostly, and it was already at that time that art was really opening up to to a really wide, diverse field of different possibilities, different media, different kind of styles and different areas. So you had not anymore something like Impressionism or Expressionism or other movements which at some time dominated the existing scene. And my background was photography. That's what I did as well as some kind of artist in my early stages. And that was my background as well, what I had studied for myself historically. But at that time already, photography was established on the art market and was becoming an established factor on the different scenes. So in my research, I found out about digital art. At that time, it was called computer art. And when I researched into it and I met different artists and looked in what they were doing, I realized that they experienced a lot of rejection. So there were artists who were working since the 60s with the computer and used it to create their art, and they were not accepted at all. Even so, when they mentioned it was created with a computer, it was really something really bad. So curators or museum directors would really feel like that has nothing to do with art, that can't be art because a machine is doing it. They had this really naive impression that you press a button on the computer and then the art is created. Of course, that's not the fact. So I developed this project, which is now called DAM Project, which was at the beginning just an online museum. It still exists. So what you see here on the screen is basically what we are doing. We have 3 fields. The first is the museum, the online museum, which is being built and is a resource for the history of digital art since the 60s and the 70s. The second field is the galleries. We have now 2 in Berlin in Germany, the main gallery, and there's another gallery in Cologne, which is just moving to a different location. And the third field is an award, a lifetime award on digital art, which I initiated in 2005, which acknowledges the major pioneers in that field. So let me give you a short introduction, and then we later on get back into present time and discuss the possibilities and future effects, which I'm very much concerned with as well, of course, to look at the aspects how this whole field will develop, and as well how it will affect the selling and marketing of digital art as well, how it will affect the production of artists, what Escher already described before in his examples. So, so if you go on the website and you look at the museum website, an example what you see here, you are able to look at the early stages which artists started to work with the computer at what time and how long they did go on with it. So if the line ends, they already died. You see, most things were starting in the 60s. It was mostly in middle of Europe, Germany, and Japan, and the US that artists started to work with the computer. In many cases, these people were not necessarily trained artists at the beginning. They were technicians who worked at universities. You must imagine at that time, a computer would fill a whole room. Something like a quarter of this room was the space which was needed by a computer. The only way of preserving something in an artistic way, a result of a computation or of a program the artist had written, was to make a plotter drawing. A plotter was a machine, basically a table, where a pen was dirigated by the computer, by the program. So the result was a drawing which looked really very conventional. And, but it was the only way of preserving something they had created. So the first exhibitions, actual exhibitions of computer art happened in 1965. Two of them were in Germany at the time by Frida Nake and Georg Nees. These are these people here, down here, Frida Nake, Georg Nees. These people have started to work in this field, but they haven't had exhibitions. Oh, sorry. And the third person was Michael Knoll from the US. From then on, you can really talk about regular exhibitions happening on an international basis. But it took really until some time after 2000 that you could really say that digital art was entering the art market in a way that it was accepted and recognized as something which majorly influenced the contemporary art world. So on the museum site, you will find as well different information on the different artists. So you can go into it and have a look. This is an artist from Japan. You find information on in different phases, like later artists who started to work in the 80s and 90s. And you will find as well some essays on the topic. The two galleries, that was always a major and important part of the project, were the purpose, of course, was to create an income, to finance everything, but at the same time, create a market for these artists who had, for a very long time, many of them for 30, 40 years, never really sold their work, had produced work over long periods and were not really represented and shown in exhibitions. So you can choose between the two galleries, and you find basically the artists we represent in the gallery. These are not identical with the online museum. We have some major pioneers who we represent, like Manfred Mohr, who started in the 60s, and Vera Molnar. She started in the 60s as well. But we, of course, represent a lot of contemporary artists as well. And The third part of our activities is the DAM Digital Art Award. It's an award which, as I mentioned before, acknowledges the lifetime work of major pioneers, mostly people who are in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, like Vera Molnar, this old pioneer who started in 1969. She's now 86 years old. She's still working, still producing work and doing exhibitions. Let me change to English. So here you see the 4 artists who had received this Lifetime Award before. The award consists of 20,000 euros for this artist, which he or she is getting, and a museum exhibition in Germany in an established museum and a catalog. So the first ones were really early people. I've already mentioned them before. Vera Molnar, this old lady from France, and Manfred Mohr, who is German. They are all still continuing to do their work and do regular exhibitions. Norman White was an artist from Canada who had gotten into robotics very early on, so a different field. And Lynn Hirschman-Leeson is a major pioneer in the field of interactive media. She uses media in a very diverse range. On the right side, you can see how it's all coming about. We are inviting professionals from international institutions and museums to nominate an artist, and from the nominations, a jury is selecting the winner of the award every 2 years. So these are the activities I'm involved in, and when we now come into present time with digital art, then I perceive that this medium has already affected the contemporary art world in a much larger degree that most people are aware of. If I go through art fairs or exhibitions, I can see that even traditional artists who are painters or sculptors are using the computer as a tool in a very wide range, and it has already affected their aesthetics to a larger degree. I give you a few examples to show you this aspect. One very famous, I don't know if you know him, one very well-known sculptor is Tony Craig. He is an English sculptor. This is a bronze, but if you look at it, you might recognize it's the silhouette of a face. So he has used the silhouette, which is a very easy thing to do, on the computer to really make it a 3D object and pile them on top of each other. As you can see down there is another face. So that's what he really became famous with, these kind of sculptures, and they are created with the possibilities and the specific tools of a computer, which he explained to me as well when I spoke to him. Most of his collectors or people who really appreciated his work or appreciate his work didn't even know that, were not aware of it when I spoke to them. Another example is Jeff Koons. You all know Jeff Koons, who is famous for his sculptures, very pop art, glamorous sculptures he produces. This is just an example of a painting and how it was produced. He describes in his catalog, this painting was basically collaged with Photoshop on the computer. Typical aesthetic style, which is of course referring to collages, which we know already from the early 20th century, but he gets the collages made on the computer, put together with Photoshop, and then it's even painted not by himself. It's painted by his assistants, who are delegated to do the right thing, use the right colors and so on, and he supervises it all. And then the result is then a painting which could easily be actually, more truthfully, be a print, an inkjet print on a large screen or on paper, and it would actually be the same result, but of course a painting is better to sell. The third example is an artist. She might not be that well known over here. She's doing very well in Germany. Her name is Corinne Wasmuth. What you see here, she shows how you can work with layers, which is another tool on Photoshop. If you can put different layers on top of each other, and the whole composition is influenced by this way of working with this tool, and that became a specific style of her work. I have published a few years ago, 2 years ago, a basic book about digital art. It was translated in several languages where I described the history as well, the historic background on digital art, where it's coming from, and the contemporary aspects of it. And the last chapter is actually, that's what we're going to talk about today, because it looks at the future, it looks at apps. At that time, a few years ago, some artists had started to publish apps through Apple iPhones and use it to create some kind of, or to create a different line of getting them some income, because many of the digital artists are producing work which is on the web, which is freely available, which is not really marketed, and they are not getting something back from it. So iPhone apps, at the beginning, iPhone apps, of course, now we have Android and everything else, were one possibilities where they felt they could use it to create some income for themselves. So some artists have started to do that, and I think we will now discuss it as soon as our introduction is finished, that in further detail, what possibilities these will bring about, and how it will as well affect the marketing or the perspective regarding art. Thank you very much.
那我现在先请张一鸣先生，然后之后我们来做一些提问跟交叉的讨论。
主持人Wolfgang，大家好，非常高兴今天有这个机会跟大家分享一些有关在 mobile 以及跟 content 相关的一些思考的方法。那么，因为刚刚主持人有提到一个抓鬼的案例，那原来其实我本来没有把这个案例放到今天的内容里面，我刚刚又临时有把它抓出来哈。那我们就先看一下那个案例，然后再接下去我今天的一些分享的内容。